As a registered person on the webinar, you will automatically receive a recording of the webinar, but you do not automatically receive the slides. So if today's topic interested you and you liked it and wanted to have the slides for yourselves, you are more than welcome to contact me directly by sending me an email and requesting the slides, and I will send them out to you. My contact information is at the end of this webinar, and you'll have that and you can get in touch with me. So once again, my name is Derek Wallace. I'm the Director of Product Management for Multitech Systems, and I am your host and presenter for the Many Faces of LPWAN webinar. And we're just going to dive right in. It's 2 minutes past. So a little bit about the agenda once my monitor responds to me. There we go. So it's broken down to these topics here. We're just going to a little bit about how LPWAN is solving IoT challenges and kind of how it came about. We'll dive into a bit of cellular LPWAN and then unlicensed LPWAN, with really focusing on LoRa technology and LoRaWAN. There are other LPWANs, and I'll touch on some of them briefly, and I won't even discuss some others. This you'll still find it interesting, and I can give you information if you contact me where to find information on other LPWAN technologies. And then at the end, we have a little use case quiz on LPWANs, like which technology is fit for purpose for different use cases. And that turned out to be quite popular yesterday. I got a lot of responses to the quiz. So I'm just going to keep going right in. Societal impact of IoT. Now, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this slide, but in essence, this slide is why I get up in the morning, why I come to work, because IoT, and in particular industrial IoT, where Multitech spends a lot of our time in, it's really helping solve some great problems in the world to really improve the lives of people all over the world. And you can see some areas here and some stats. I personally have been involved with customers doing projects and delivering solutions that are helping people in developing countries and third world countries, and also in the developed nation, as it were. I don't really like those titles, but it can be descriptive. There are some amazing things that's happening that really is improving lives of people all over the world, and the use cases and ways we can go and where we can go. New things are happening every day, and this is just an exploding field, and it must be if you are attending today's webinar. You may feel the same way. So just start with the very basic, what is LPWAN? Most of you probably know this, but we're talking about low power wide area networks and technologies in specific. And these were developed really to answer these 4 bullets, but really the first 3 bullets in all honesty. In solving problems regarding long battery life, how do I enable assets or sensors out there in the world to last for years and years on a battery without needing to change it? Getting really wide area connectivity, distance between your system and the assets that you want to connect to and get information from or control. And then cost. It's got to be very cheap, and I'll talk about that in a little bit. And once again, should you have questions, please go ahead and use the question area in your taskbar for the webinar. So connecting things to the internet. So IoT, it's a buzzword. It's also a massive industry that's growing. It's also not exactly new. Previously, a lot of people talk about M2M communication, so machine to machine. And before that, SCADA systems and other solutions and technologies and areas in the world where really you're connecting one machine or one object to another machine or another object with really not much human interaction. In the case of the Internet of Things, and what we're talking about is connecting things out there in the world to the Internet from a one to many, many, many perspective instead of a one-to-one, which you tended to find more in the machine-to-machine world. Now, Ericsson famously or infamously said several years ago that there is going to be 50 billion devices connected to the Internet by 2020, and they have since walked back on that. But if you look at analyst reports, you're seeing lots and lots of numbers in the billions of connected devices out there in the world. That's going to be happening over the next decade or so. And I've got some slides to talk about forecasted shipments and whatnot. Now, there's lots of good reasons to connect stuff out in the world, but there's also a lot of challenges. And it's those challenges that we see here that really have impacted, the ability to connect a lot of things out there in the world. And when people talk, or when Ericsson was talking about billions and billions of devices, a lot of people started thinking about, oh, it's a lot of new or greenfield opportunities. But in reality, a lot of these devices already exist out in the world, especially in the industrial space. And previously, it's been very difficult, or the technologies just simply didn't really exist to efficiently, cost effectively solving concrete problems and delivering an ROI to connect all those assets in the world. And then came along this thing called LPWAN, or low power wide area network technologies. And those technologies were built or created to really try to overcome a lot of these challenges at the edge that you see here. Now, I'm not going to go into every bullet because that would bore you. And I talk about different aspects of this throughout the presentation. But really, that's what LPWAN is all about. It's how can I enable those 50 billion devices in the world to get connected by overcoming these challenges so that it makes sense for people to start going into this field. So we've got the challenge, and then what's the solution? Well, one of the solutions is this concept of low power wide area network technology. And so many of the next wave of devices that are connected will, now this says fixed location sensors, and that's true. We're talking sensors that are out there for water, soil, moisture, air, parking, temperature, humidity. I mean, there's so many sensors that are out there, but it's difficult to connect them. And one thing that's also common across all these sensors and many of the assets that we're trying to connect now that aren't connected today, and also new assets and new use cases that need to be solved in the future, are these are constrained devices, so they don't have a lot of room for processors and batteries and memory, et cetera, et cetera. So LPWAN said, all right, I'm gonna solve some of those problems from the last page, and with the target market of these assets out there at the edge. And I've highlighted in bold here, as you can see, the real key areas that LPWAN is really trying to solve. It's power consumption and batteries. When you think of assets out in the world or sensors out in the world, they are in locations or will be in locations that are difficult to reach. They could be very up high on poles. They could be out in very extreme rural areas. They can be underground. They can be built into an asset that is then put under cement. They could be in all these locations that are really hard to get to once you've deployed that asset in the field. And if those assets are battery powered, they need to last many, many years because one does not want to send a truck rollout to have to switch the battery. So power consumption that enables long battery life is one of the key targets that LPWAN needs to solve. Cost obviously is important. 50 billion times cost for each one of those billions is a lot of money. So we got to figure out a way to solve those issues being low cost. And then range. So whether that range is outdoors and you need miles and miles of coverage between your gateway or your tower to the asset or sensor that you want to connect to, or whether you're in an urban location or city location where you need to go through buildings, through cement, through glass, through metal, underground, it's very important that we can reach those assets. And it does address these other issues as well, which we'll talk about later on, but that really is what LPWAN is trying to solve. And there are different kinds of LPWANs out there that address this, which we'll talk about. So with that in mind, as I said before, connecting things to other machines or other things is not new, but it is exploding. There have been technologies in the past that still exist today and are very good for what they do. As a matter of fact, Multitech, we are a manufacturer of communications technologies that enables the Internet of Things, that enables machine to machine, that enables objects to talk to objects. And so for the LAN side and the cellular, the two left boxes here, there are these technologies which are fairly well known and good. They're very good at what they do. And you can see down below what they're good at. In the large and the short range, it's good for those things. And the cellular, as you can see, it's good for long range, high data rates and coverage, where the cell coverage actually exists. Now, they're not good for a couple of things that the low power wireless technologies was specifically designed to do, and that's battery life and long range. And in case of cellular, low OPEX. If you think of your cell phones that you have, you are paying a subscription for that, almost certainly, unless you're doing pay per use. And that's recurring every single month. And so with assets out in the field, that can be too costly if that asset isn't valuable enough to warrant a data plan associated with it. So along comes this low power wire area network technology on the right, and you can see several there. Those are all unlicensed versions of LPWANs. There are also licensed versions, and we're going to be going into that shortly. And they are good for exactly the things we talked about on the previous slide: long range, battery, and cost. We're not talking high data rate, and that's important. We're not talking about video. However, in the case of LTE Cat M1, so cellular technology, it actually can support voice and slightly higher data rates, so it's good for that. And so although you see LTE Cat M1 and narrowband IT under cellular, because it is a cellular technology, it also will be copying and paste that and putting that under the low power WAN area as well. So now we've got technologies in the past that didn't do the things that we need to overcome for IoT. For those use cases where battery life, long range, and cost really matter. And then we've introduced in the world has been seeing these LPWAN technologies. This is a nice little chart from James Brame and Associates. They're very, very good consulting and analyst house. They came up with this, and there's a few other charts I used by them in this presentation that talks about when you're talking about IoT, the average data consumption of these devices, it's small. 75% are predicted to be using 1 megabit or less at a time. You get up to over 80% when you're talking less than 3 megabits. So these assets out in the field, and you saw what LPWAN isn't necessarily good for high data rate, is because we don't need to accommodate high data rates. We're talking devices that are going to sleep. They wake up, they transmit their information out to the cloud for someone to use, to take actions, to get long-term data analytics, or to control assets or take actions. So you don't need a lot of data consumption and use, and LPWAN really does a great job of solving that. So now we've kind of talked a little about the history of, how LPWANs is addressing IoT needs, why it came about, and the challenges they're overcoming. Now we're going to start breaking it down to cellular and licensed technology and unlicensed technology. So cellular technology, which is a licensed technology, so people need to operate on licensed spectrum. There are rules associated with that, and there's often costs associated with that. But there's also other benefits associated with it as well, which I'll talk about later. Now, cellular, a lot of people are very aware of cellular, and I like this slide because it talks about the technology lifecycle. And what you can see here is going back to 1980 with the advent of 1G, we see the average life cycle of a technology, by this I mean 1G, 2G, 3G, 4G, of 18 and a half years approximately. And then you've got from when the technology was launched to its peak time. And with 4G, which really was first all about higher speeds compared to 3G, that's now with 3GPP release 13. That's where Cat M and narrowband IT or narrowband 1, you are going to hear as you do your research out in the world different names for the same technology. It can be confusing. Don't worry. I and others are here to help you with that. But the important thing with 4G is that we've got some cellular LPWAN technologies that's been introduced. We got a few years before it peaks. And right around that 2020, 2021 period, we're going to start seeing 5G introduced. It just coincides with what the cellular has been doing, introducing a new technology at the peak or right around the peak of the existing technologies. And there's going to be some exciting things about 5G, and we will have webinars later this year that talk about Multitech and what we're bringing to the market to help solve problems that 5G addresses. So now that we are in 4G and we've got some cellular LPWAN technology of Cat M1 and narrowband IT, and I should also say in LTE, you've got speeds going up. So you've got Cat 3, you've got Cat 4, you've got Cat 6. A lot of you have phones today that are using Cat 6 speeds. Some are using Cat 4 speeds, but I think most are Cat 6. You're going to be seeing 8G, 10G, and above. And when 5G comes along, you're going to be seeing serious increases in bandwidth. But for IoT and the use cases we talked about, we need much less bandwidth. And I do have a great slide later on that talks about the speeds of different technologies. So with Cat-M1 and Narrowband IoT, we're drastically going down in speed to make it fit for purpose to solve the IoT needs. This slide really is just saying IoT with Cat-M1 and Narrowband IoT on the right, those volumes are going to be growing over the years. As those billions of devices start coming online, cellular LPWAN in the form of Narrowband IoT and IoT and Cat-M are going to be increasing in volume to address those use cases and needs. So it's growing. So if you're considering selling or creating solutions that address IoT, LPWAN technology is absolutely great. It's a growing industry, and it's definitely something that is worthwhile getting involved in. Multitech can help you with that as well. So we know that modules are going to be shipping, increasing over the years in LPWAN. But what is it about this Cat-M1 and Narrowband IoT that has been done, going down in speeds, decreasing speeds to address the IoT needs? Well, here is a pretty good summary on the changes or new features that have been added. So power saving mode at the top, that's existed since Cat-1 at least. The thing about power saving mode in Cat-1 and other devices is that when that device is asleep, you cannot reach the asset, which is not useful in IoT. And Cat-1 was introduced a couple of years ago, and it's not really quite it's not an LPWAN technology, but it's getting closer and trying to meet LPWAN needs. However, Cat-M and Narrowband IoT are really the cellular world's true first forays into LPWAN technologies, and they did that by adding this capability of the EDRX, so extended discontinuous reception. And that, as you can see from that bullet point, it enables the device to be reached while it's asleep, and you can set the idle mode that's configurable. It's also, and what that does is it helps with the power consumption by enabling the device to sleep more often, therefore not be connected to the cellular network and drawing power. That's one of the benefits of that technology, which is a key point of power consumption when it comes to IoT. Extended coverage, we talked about range and needing to be able to reach assets out there in the world. This is what has been added as well, and you can see the bullet points there that just talk about some of the ways that they've extended the coverage to increase the link budget and power output for that range. So you can see extended coverage, you've got up to 16 dB for Cat-M and up to 24 dB for Narrowband IoT. Now, voice, what are the differences between Cat-M1 and Narrowband IoT? We go into this a bit later, but voice is one of them. So Cat-M can support voice. Narrowband IoT does not support voice, just doesn't have the bandwidth for it. And then mobility. Cat-M is definitely a mobile technology. It enables and supports mobile use cases. Narrowband IoT really doesn't support mobile. There are some limited circumstances where mobility can be supported, but by and large, almost all use cases that really are going to provide a return on investment that I've seen and I expect to see will, if you're using cellular LPWAN, you're going to need Cat-M1 to support those use cases. Going on, so now we talked about kind of what it does, and there are other features that were added to make Narrowband IoT and Cat-M1 fit for purpose for IoT. This map is great. We get asked this question a lot by customers around the world. So what carriers around the world are going to support what technologies? Because as you are a person that may be out there trying to create new solutions and use it for different markets, if you're working with cellular LPWAN, it's helpful to know what carriers have committed to which technologies, and that's what this map shows. And another thing I'd like to point out, talking about licensed technology now, I'm going to talk about unlicensed soon, is that Multitech, in my personal opinion, is that the LPWAN technologies are going to be complementary in many ways, and the carriers are showing that as well. Some carriers that are only focusing on, say, Cat M1 or narrowband IT, they may adopt unlicensed technologies to help increase their LPWAN IoT network. In fact, several around the world who are just really looking at Cat M1, Verizon is a good example, is absolutely committing to utilizing LoRa technology to help boost and improve their IoT LPWAN network. So you can expect to see that as well, but this slide definitely helps you figure out who's going to be doing what around the world. Now, this is a good time for me to repeat because people tend to like this slide a lot. As an attendee, you are going to get a recording. Automatically, you get sent a recording of today's webinar. However, if you want the slides, you will need to contact me directly by sending me an email and requesting the slides, and then I can send that out to you if you want. So Multitech, we are very well known in the LoRa world and unlicensed LPWAN technology. We're absolutely world leaders, but we also have been involved in cellular technology for quite a long time. And here's my little commercial pitch that just lets you know we sell and manufacture and make a lot of cellular products. And with regards to the Cat M1, we have released last month our socket modem and our hardened cellular modem in the middle there, and we're the first certified products on AT&T's network in North America. And we're going through and finishing up Verizon certification right now, and we're working with other carriers around the world to get certified on their networks. We will also have been working with T-Mobile. Yes, I'm pretty sure it was T-Mobile, where we did a joint narrowband IT demonstration at Mobile World Congress Americas last September. We've been working with Vodafone in Europe in their labs with narrowband IT for about a year now. So we will be releasing those products for narrowband IT as well as the networks are fit for purpose and deployed around the world and are ready to carry traffic. So we have a broad portfolio of products in Cat M1 and narrowband IT, and I encourage you to talk to us about how those products and that technology can help support your efforts in IoT. Commercial over. So now we're going to talk about unlicensed. And in particular, we're going to talk about LoRa technology. Now, as I mentioned earlier, and I will discuss a little bit later, there are other LPWAN technologies out there. And I'm not going into a lot of them today, though I'll speak about 2 or 3 others later on. One of the reasons is these are technologies, LoRa, from the unlicensed perspective, and then the Cat M1 and narrowband IoT from the cellular, that Multitech is actively involved in manufacturing. So on the unlicensed side, we got this thing called LoRa technology. And LoRa stands for long range, and that's what it does. It has great range for connecting to assets out in the field. You can see the comparison here on this slide. LoRa is a long-range spread spectrum technology that operates below the noise floor. Because of its spread spectrum and the fact that it has error correction, it can break down the signal or the packets that are sent across the technology, and then capture some of those packets, utilize the error correction, and package the whole package intact for your application. It operates on the ISM band around the world. So those bands are free. They are unlicensed, so they're free to operate on. The bands are different around the world. So in North America, you have 915. It's often called 915, which is really operating at 902 to 928 megahertz in that range. Europe has a range of 868 that's called, and the range I think is kind of 862 to 868 or 863 to 870, I think, is the range. It's somewhere very close to that. They also have a second range of 433. It's not used quite as much, especially for IoT use cases. It's in Asia Pacific. They utilize the 915 or AS923 for a group of countries, and Australia utilizes 915. South America utilizes 915, very similar to Australia. It's a lot like what LTE does with different bands around the world. There are just different ISM bands that are used for LoRa. What's great about that is that communication from those assets out in the world to a gateway is free. So if you have one gateway that can support thousands of assets, all those communications between that gateway and the asset is free. And then you can use whatever backhaul technology you want to get it to your cloud solution or ERP solution or whatever it is that you're going to use to consume that data. So it's a very good technology. It's been around for several years. As a matter of fact, the LoRa Alliance was born at Mobile World Congress in Barcelona in 2015. Multitech is a founding member. And what LoRa Alliance does, it really governs and tries to ensure that the LoRaWAN technology is, and specification, I should say, the LoRaWAN specification is open and standards based and has multiple committees to try to ensure that happens and is aligned with companies around the world. There's over 500 companies in the LoRa Alliance. It is the fastest growing technology alliance in history. It is also important to note out that sometimes people get confused when they hear LoRa technology, LoRaWAN, and what are the differences. So LoRa is the technology. It is literally the chips and the technology that's the modulation to send to enable the transfer of data. LoRaWAN is the specification, the protocol specification of how information should be sent utilizing LoRa technology. And it's the LoRaWAN specification that is the standards, that is managed through the LoRa Alliance and those over 500 companies to ensure that if one person manufactures LoRa endpoints, it will be compatible with other manufacturers of endpoints or gateways and vice versa. So it's a very good governing body. I'm a member of the marketing committee, and I enjoy my time with them. With LoRa, and this is a differentiator between LoRa as an unlicensed technology and cellular technology, is you have 3 different kinds of networks, which enables different type of business flexibility in terms of the way that you operate and in terms of how you're going to build your business cases. So there's a public, which is subscription based. This says just like a cell phone, and that's correct. Basically, just like you are using your cell or mobile phone to join your carrier's network, there are public LoRa network providers around the world. There's a lot of them, and they cover a lot of cities around the world. Multitech works with all of them and utilizing our equipment. They provide and build a network, and then people with LoRa assets that want to utilize LoRa for their business cases and use cases join their networks. So it's great for low capex because you're simply paying a subscription. It's good for mobility, especially when LoRaWAN 1.1 is widely adopted in the market. It absolutely talks about mobility and speed of deployment. Then you have private, and this is the differentiator between cellular LPWAN and unlicensed. Private is, there's lots of places in the world where either a public LoRa network doesn't exist or a cell phone network doesn't exist. Think of very rural locations for farm, agriculture. Think of energy, oil, and gas out there in places in the world. Think when you go camping or just there's lots of places where there isn't cell phone coverage. Now, the good thing about LoRa is that it is very easy to build your own network. You can build your own network to cover a small area. You can build your own network to cover a large area. The private version of LoRa networks is really building a network for a small area, and you can manage it yourself fairly easy. You can have someone else manage it on your behalf. And then you've got the enterprise, which is absolutely meant for larger areas, for enterprises or companies that want to cover a wide geographic area. You can build your own LoRa network yourself. And again, you can build it and operate it yourself, or you can build it and have someone else manage it for you. And that flexibility comes in really handy depending on the use cases that you're trying to address. And that we'll talk about that in a little bit later. LoRa also has 3 different classes of operation, and people do tend to, when I see all the comparisons between cellular LPWAN technology and LoRa unlicensed, one of the things that I note is that almost all the comparisons are done against LoRa Class A only. and forgetting that there are two other classes that support different use cases. So one of the things, LoRa Class A is really a half duplex technology. Devices wake up, they connect, they go back to sleep, and every single LoRaWAN device that is certified needs to be Class A. But that class doesn't really support full duplex communication, nor does it really support firmware over the update solutions. Class C, however, which was the second class that was introduced, is very good when it comes to firmware over the updates and multicast and full duplex communication. And it's that class it's always on. It means continuous. And when you're thinking and evaluating what technologies to use for your use cases, and there's lots of different data points that you're going to use, it's important that you have full information to make those make your decisions. And like I said, I do believe unlicensed and licensed technologies can be very complementary in many cases, and we manufacture devices that utilize both. So LoRa absolutely can support full duplex communication, and it can support firmware over the air updates and multicast. So keep that in mind as you do your research. Just like in the cellular world, we Multitech, we manufacture a lot of LoRa products. We manufacture gateways, and just a moment, please. Sorry, I'm back, everyone. So we manufacture gateways in the world as well that you can see here, and we also manufacture LoRa endpoints. So whether it's cellular LPWAN technology or whether it's LoRaWAN technology, Multitech is a good partner to work with. This slide really shows our M dots. We also have a series called X dots as well, and we'd be very happy to talk to you about either one. This next slide is actually quite a good slide, and many of you will probably be interested in this. So I talked before that there are several LPWAN technologies that are out there in the world. This slide does a really good job of talking about the technical characteristics of the different technologies. Now I'm going to talk about all these a little bit more in a few slides. I'm going to talk a little about Sigfox, Ingenue. I'm going to talk about Bluetooth mesh and Wi-Fi. But this is a slide that you may want to peruse in your leisure to get a good summary of the differences feature-wise between the technologies. One of the things I'll point out is the power efficiency. You can see LoRaWAN, Sigfox are considered very high, Cat-M1 is medium, and Narrowband IoT is considered high. So there's slightly difference there, and that can come up in use cases as you're deciding which technologies to use. The data rates and the link budgets and all that, you can see that here as well. So we've talked about this LPWAN and how it's introducing, or how it's really been designed to solve problems out there in the world. And this is what we're seeing in terms of more and more use cases in IoT are going to be using LPWAN technology. And you can see the verticals on the left. And this slide we're actually going to be updating because out to probably 2022, and you're going to see that growth continue with more and more use cases that will be served by LPWAN technologies. And the technology strengths over there on the right, you can see that as well. So we'll be adding Narrowband IoT to this. It would overlap Cat-M1 a little bit, but it would also definitely be better in terms of link budget, battery life when it comes to Narrowband IoT and its strengths, as well as cost in comparison to Cat-M1. LoRa and Narrowband IoT will overlap more as well. And then Cat-M1, I talked about before, it can support voice, so it is good for supporting some voice use cases. And then you've got another forecast. Again, this is another James Brayman Associates slide. Really just talks about as time goes on, you're going to see more and more LPWAN space in the market addressing IoT use cases. And the boxes on the right basically tell a story that pretty much every LPWAN technology and communication technologies to support IoT, that's going to be growing in the future as well. And those slides I talked about previous discuss that as well. It's really painting a picture. It's a good time to get into LPWAN. Here's another slide. Now this is interesting because on the left, it talks about, here's some forecasts from IHS that talks about the expected share of the market for different types of LPWAN technologies. And that one's pretty interesting. And what I also find pretty interesting on that is you can see Sigfox there. They're the light blue at the bottom. Now Sigfox, you know, they make a good technology, and they were a pioneer, and I'll go on about that in about 2 slides. Now they've been experiencing some trouble lately that's been out there in the press, and it's going to be interesting to see how they, you know, recapture that, given what their technology does, the strengths and limitations of it. So that could stay the same. It could drop. You know, at this point, I mean, I have an opinion. I don't really want to share it at this point, but it will be interesting to see if those forecasts hold up. I believe the rest of the forecasts, those are going to be spot on. And you see on the right as well, you know, 2018, we're going to be seeing some pretty decent growth in LPWAN technologies, but really, this field is set to explode in terms of use cases and the ability to solve problems out there in the world. Pretty much every analyst and every report I read is saying the same thing, but without the exuberance of the Ericsson 50 billion from a few years ago. Although that's probably going to be hit, just not quite by 2020. Okay, now we're going to talk about unlicensed and licensed technologies together. Now this slide, I could spend the whole webinar just talking about this slide and going into different details. It's a really great slide, and lots of people like this slide. What it shows you is unlicensed technology at the top and licensed technology at the bottom. And then it talks about different technologies. As I said today, I've been focusing on LoRa for the unlicensed and Cat-M and narrowband IoT for the unlicensed. You can see at the very bottom the data rates and where the technologies I focus on today. But there are other LPWAN technologies out there, and they all do different things well. And in this case, we've got, and there is even the high power LTE Cat 3 to Cat 11 categories. So I talked about Sigfox. Sigfox, we at Multitech, we analyzed all the unlicensed technologies, you know, several years ago to decide which ones did we want to use. And we looked at Sigfox. To their credit, they were a pioneer. They were one of the first out there building unlicensed Sigfox networks to address IoT needs. And, you know, they were a pioneer. That it was very risky. The data rates are fairly low when it comes to Sigfox, as you can see there. They also have limitations in terms of how many times you can transmit per day. And then you have to join their Sigfox networks, much like you have to join a cellular network. Now, there are plenty of use cases where that is absolutely fit for purpose. So there could be a situation where you find Sigfox network in your neighborhood and you have a use case and Sigfox matches that, which is great. More power to you. Ingenue is another unlicensed technology that's been around for a while. They have slightly different use cases. They have slightly higher data rates as well. You tend to join their network, or they'll build and manage a network for you. So slightly different business model than Sigfox, and definitely different than LoRa. But, you know, it's a good technology as well. It remains to be seen how far and wide they will spread for people to take advantage of that technology. Wi-Sun is a very popular technology, especially in Asia, and it's definitely been growing in use in North America in the energy space, utilities. It's a good technology. And then Bluetooth mesh. So this Bluetooth SIG introduced Bluetooth mesh. I think it was about July last year. It's a mesh technology. It's very good as well. It's very new, and it will definitely solve some use cases, especially those where you need that higher data throughput. As I said below, what I said before was I believe that many technologies are complementary, and they're complementary between licensed and unlicensed because of the pain points that they address, which my next slide will go into. But also, there is no silver bullet for technologies to solve every single IoT use case. And that's really pointed out on the very top of the slide where you've got long range and low power to the left in the red, and then you've got mission critical data on the right. If you want longer range and lower power consumption, i.e. batteries lasting for years and years at a time, it's pretty hard to marry that up and get mission critical, very low latency, high quality of service, and very high data throughput. It's just they're not compatible to each other. So it's very important that whatever technologies you're considering, that you look at what are the pain points that I need to solve, and then what technology fits those pain points. You can see the cellular license band at the bottom, and I've talked about a lot of that already, so I'm not going to focus much more time on that. But the speeds help as well to give you an idea of what speeds those technologies support if you're considering them. And again, ladies and gentlemen, all around the world, if you would like these slides, please email me after today, and otherwise you will get a recording of this show. And if you have any questions, please use your taskbar to send me your questions. So, licensed and unlicensed key features. And this question we get asked all the time, and there's lots and lots of articles out there that do talk about it. So what I've tried to do here is just kind of show you the main differences and that licensed and unlicensed, what they're really good at, which are the items in bold, especially in comparison against each other, and then what they're good at in general, which would be the rest of the items there, and then what they're not so great at. Because again, it always comes down to what is your use case, what are the pain points that you're trying to solve. So I'll start with license. The real true differentiators, in my opinion, between licensed and unlicensed are those top three areas there. Quality of service, latency, very low latency, and supporting mission critical use cases. So and cellular technology has been around for quite a long time. That there's a lot of value in that as well. But if you need your data and your packets to get through every single time, and you want to guarantee on a quality of service, license is great. And Cat-M1 and narrowband IT in particular also has very low latency. Now, here we talk about low capex. It's generally you're joining a subscription service to join those networks. And for a lot of use cases, that's absolutely fine. I talked earlier about the differences between Cat-M1 and narrowband IT, and two of those differences are the mobility and the voice. So Cat-M1 absolutely has mobility, as does LoRa when LoRaWAN 1.1 comes out. And Cat-M1 can support voice, some voice applications, which narrowband IT cannot, and neither can LoRa communication. It has that higher bandwidth capability, which you saw on the previous slide. So the other thing that's really good in terms of security, in terms of setting up VPNs and firewalls, cellular technology is great for that. Absolutely. It's definitely a differentiator. Security is good in cellular. Security is very good in LoRa as well. So I'm going to hop over to the LoRa side. Actually, before I do that, I will note that the power consumption, and you would have seen earlier from that multi-technology feature slide, that power consumption in narrowband IT, although not as good as LoRa, and I expect there to be lots of debates about that in the future. It's ongoing right now, but narrowband IT power consumption is definitely much better than Cat-M1. So when you're thinking about those assets, they need to last for years on the battery. Between Cat-M1 and narrowband IT, you would definitely want to use narrowband IT if that is your primary pain point you're solving. On the unlicensed side, and LoRa, I've got two things that are related to each other. You'll see there that the low OPEX or low CAPEX really is tied to the business model flexibility. Earlier, I had talked about there are three different types of LoRaWAN networks: public, private, and enterprise. And that gives you, as a person, the choice of how do you want to utilize LPWAN technology. And the licensed cellular side, you have one option. You're joining their networks. You can join a network on the LoRa side and therefore have low CapEx because you're just doing an OpEx, but you can also build your own networks very easily, especially using multi-tech equipment. Another commercial there. But that gives you the flexibility that if there is no network in your area, if you do not want to join a network that other people are associated with, if that network doesn't have all the features that you want, you can create a network and you can develop it and manage it as you want. You can also find others to manage the network on your behalf, but it's still your own network. The power consumption is very good. The locations, because of that business model flexibility, is also a very good benefit for LoRa because just like with cellular, there's going to be plenty of locations around the world where you're just not going to get cell phone coverage or have a public LoRa network, but you can absolutely put up your own network. Cost. Now, this is a battle as well that's going on between the two licensed and unlicensed technologies is cost. With cellular, you're joining a network, so you're paying a monthly subscription or a subscription data plan for those devices. As you pay that throughout the life of your contract, that could get expensive, especially if you multiply that by thousands and thousands and thousands of assets that you're connecting. On the other hand, because of the power of the cellular ecosystem and that they've been in this for quite a while, they're going to be dropping their module prices significantly over time. So your upfront cost for a module may be cheaper on the licensed side, but your long-term TCO is going to be more expensive on the licensed, in my opinion. Whereas on the LoRa unlicensed side, your total cost of ownership over time is probably going to be cheaper because you have the flexibility to join a network, or you can put up your own network and then manage that exactly to the needs of your business. And then that helps drive down your TCO over time. I'm happy to talk about either. I see debates on both sides of this and out there in the world, but that's pretty much where I see it. Security. Existing LoRaWAN protocols or specifications, which right now it's 1.0.2, and that is going to come out in, well, that's existing now. 1.0.3 is about to be introduced, and the paradigm shift for security will happen in LoRaWAN 1.1. That has been specified, it's been ratified, it's being released into the market now. It's still going to be a while before it's widely available, but that changes two things. It changes the security paradigm, like I said, to be an extremely secure communication. There's been very serious audits done by some very serious security companies that came away very impressed with LoRaWAN security in 1.1, even more so than security in 1.0.2. And mobility, LoRaWAN 1.1 does address mobility as well. However, if you need quality of service, if you want very low latency, and although Class C does give you some very good latency, in comparison to licensed technology, LoRa it's definitely not fit for purpose for quality of service. If you want your packets there every single time, it's not good for that. And the latency isn't as good as in licensed technology. And of course, from the previous slide you saw, the data rates aren't as high in comparison to, say, Cat M1 and the licensed spectrum. So let me just come up here a second. All right. I got some comments. Okay. I got from Mike McGinnis. He asked a question on LoRaWAN and security for 1.1 will provide FIPS 140-2 security compliance for defense industry enterprise network use. Mike, that's an outstanding question, and I don't have an answer for you right now. I will go speak, however, with David Smith. He is our Senior VP of Engineering at Multitech. He is on the technical committee of the LoRa Alliance, and he absolutely will know the answer to that question. So, Mike, if you can email me, I will see this question later, but I might forget by the time I get this report from the webinar, and my contact details are at the end of the slide. If you can email me that same question, I will get back to you with an answer. So going back to that, that's really when you're looking at, oh, do I use unlicensed? Do I use license? You know, what works for me? What's better than the other? It's really these things that we're talking about there, and always in comparison against your use case. One of the other items that I've seen out there in the world that it seems to be much more commonplace now when it comes to IoT than before, which is important, is people, IoT, LPWAN, they can be buzzwords. Lots of IoT projects die in the pilot or POC phase. And a lot of that is because there isn't a clear use case or a clear problem that is trying to be solved or a new business model that one is trying to enable. But it's not just about that business model. One has to ask the question, is that business model or new service going to be something that your target market wants to pay money for? So when you are evaluating technologies, whether it's licensed or unlicensed in LPWAN, be very clear about what problems you're trying to solve. Why is it worth solving? How will the people who would use your solution benefit? Are they going to pay for that? And in your pilots and your POCs, absolutely make sure that you've defined what success looks like and what the triggers are to expand a POC into a pilot and a pilot into production, say, or a small beta trial or whatever the case may be. You know, technology is great, but if technology is not solving problems, then from my perspective, it's just a nice to have. It's not a need to have, and people absolutely won't pay money for that. So that sounded a bit preachy, but it's absolutely true. It's why a lot of proof of concepts die in IoT. And I wish you all much better success, regardless of the technology that you use. Pick the technology that solves your problems, that enables your ideas to solve problems for other people that are going to be perceived and used as valuable by the market. Okay, going on to the next slide. So here is another slide. It does a couple of things. It talks about the forecast for industries for the different shipments, and you can see everything's growing, especially starting in 2019. But you see good growth here. But then you see the industries that are going to start using these LPWAN technologies. Now on the right, we have different use cases and the different technologies between Cat-M and LoRa color coding and where they fit really well. We'll be adding narrowband IT to this as well. Just didn't have time to do that before the show. To really start, when you combine the slide previously of the differences between licensed and unlicensed, the features that they have, the pain points that they overcome, then it starts to map for which technologies are maybe perhaps more applicable for different use cases and industries. And we're seeing that today. And as I said before, multiple times now, many times they're going to be complementary technologies. And then it's a case, and you can see that here with the different colors that overlap in areas. That clearly says that it's complementary. They may solve some of the same problems, but they do it in different ways. And it's those different ways that you need to factor into which technology do I use. Is it a business model flexibility? Do I have to join a network or do I want my own private network? Is it a location? Is that technology available where you plan to deploy, not only today, but tomorrow? Is that technology great, but it's over-spec? I don't need quite that much bandwidth in order to solve the problem, or doesn't quite have enough bandwidth to solve that problem. So it starts pointing you in the right directions. And this is one of the ways that we view the market and how the different technologies can help you. And this next slide does a lot of the same things as well. It strips out the higher end LTE Cat 3. We need to add narrowband IT in here. And one thing that I would absolutely say is narrowband IT and Cat-M for the consumer world, consumer IoT, when you see home automation, wearables, healthcare devices, as opposed to say maybe home healthcare systems, cellular technology is going to be great for that, because a lot of times cellular companies will be utilizing that technology as it delivers a service to you. And just like your cell phone, you may add extra services. The carriers that are going to be providing these services over this, it's much more sense for them on a wearable or home automation to just add another $1 a month to your plan that already is covering other services that you use as well. And because of the quality of service and the latency of those technologies, it really is absolutely fit for purpose and better than unlicensed for those scenarios. Once again, it's not just technology, it's also business case, ROI, and the flexibility. So you can see the stuff on the left. I've talked about a lot of that already, but what we try to do there is really just give you some of the key differences between the technologies, what use cases that they're probably better suited. There absolutely is overlap. There will be lots of times where it's complementary technologies. And now we're getting to the end of our show. I promised you we'd have a little bit of a use case quiz, and that's what this is about. So here's the first one. We've got a scenario with tank monitoring. So first of all, these are in rural locations. These assets, they're battery powered, so they need to last a very, very long time. So they need extremely high power efficiency or very, very low power consumption. Very wide area and long range line of sight. So the question would be then, what kind of technology between the licensed and unlicensed is best? And given that, we say LoRa technology using outdoor gateways. One of the triggers was the fact that it's rural. So a lot of these places, you're just not going to have cell phone towers and cell phone coverage. You need that very long range line of sight, that power output and link budget, and LoRa is going to really help you with that. And also, you may want your own private network because of the locations it's in. So LoRa helps you do that as well. Next use case, point of sale machines. So vending, terminals, kiosks. These are typically located in retail stores, shopping malls, restaurants. It's being used all day. You need very fast latency because no one wants to wait. You need very good quality of service. And you want the ability to set up probably VPNs and secure channels because you're sending credit card information out there to be PMI, I think it's PMI, compliant. So what technology works for that? What we say is LTE Cap M. Gives you the bandwidth that you need. And with our RSO, our router, it has the capability of setting up VPNs and firewalls for sending that data as you want it. And of course, it has the latency and it has the coverage because it's located in those dense areas. And the great thing about where it's located, and because you're using cellular for your backhaul, you're bypassing and avoiding the local network, which is critical in these situations. There are many companies out there or many multi-use, multi-tenanted areas where there is a local network that's only intent to be used by the local company or management company, and they absolutely do not want other traffic on that network. Well, in order to reach where you need to reach, using Cat-M or cellular technology is great because you can bypass that local network. Okay, here's another one, distributed energy, smart green. This one can be tricky. You've got solar panels. You can sell your energy back to the grid. You do need low latency, especially because of the demand response. So you want to make sure that as spikes happen or peaks start happening, you can react very, very quickly to that. And that's kind of the key in this one. And if you look at your energy bills, for example, we get gouged the most when we have those high spikes of energy. But that's also a great time to sell energy back to the grid and make money for yourself. So technology, Cat-M. Again, cellular technology. And for Multitech, we recommend our cell product because you don't necessarily need to set up VPNs. There's no intelligence in that product, so it's a bit cheaper because the intelligence is in the application, the assets you're connecting to. Another one, agriculture. Think farms, think many different use cases of what you're trying to connect to get different information. I've had you'd be amazed how many different use cases there are out there in IoT for cows. Where is that cow? Where is it gone? I've talked to people who are tracking cows because they say it takes a cowboy, and literally they say cowboy to me, to find a cow. It could take them half a day to find a cow. Or they want to quarantine the cow because they can tell that it's sick and they don't want to infect the rest of the herd. Or that cow is in gestation and it's about to give birth and they want to know what's happening there so they can make that as efficient as possible. So these are rural locations. Bursty traffic, you don't need quality of service. And we say LoRa technology. So, and Multitech just happens to manufacture a lot of LoRa technology. So, and another use case, healthcare. So, we've got lots of different use cases: ambulances, asset tracking in the building, monitoring of equipment, patient monitoring, power, water. Some need quality of service, some need latency. Now, what we say is cellular, and this is our Dragonfly, our embedded um, um, system on module product that has 2 variants, and it's very good for this scenario. But here, and I talked about this before, there is overlap. There are some use cases within medical that LoRa technology is great, and we have people who are doing that. And there's a lot of use cases where cellular works as well. So again, it just goes back to pain points, business model, your use case, what you're trying to solve. And you take all these into fact and then have at it and create some awesome solutions to help solve a lot of the world's big problems. And that's pretty much it for the webinar. I thank you very much for your time. My details are on the next slide if you want to contact me. This is where you can go to get more information on our website for our products, the LoRa Hub, to learn out more about Multitech, and our developer site if you want more detailed information, specifications, and technical information on our products. And then the last slide. Thank you. Once again, I'm Derek Wallace, Director of Product Management for Multitech. There's my contact info with my email address. If you would like the slides from today, send me an email. I'll be very happy to send you the slides. And if you have any questions, go ahead and send that to me as well. And with that, if you have any questions, please fire away. Otherwise, I will close the webinar in about a minute or 2. Thank you very much, everyone. And if there are no questions, I wish you all a lovely day or evening wherever you happen to be.